as you heard, my orientation, I think we're feeling this throughout the conference, as we talk about problems, we're really trying to stress solutions, and one of the clear solutions, our bias, is that organic is a solution to a lot of the problems we're hearing about in terms of management of land, agriculture, buildings, the built environment, as well as the natural environment. So most of these folks actually, let's see, four of the five you've already heard from in presentations. So we're going to give them a chance to add to their presentation if that's what you choose to do. And then Paula is here as she has long-standing work on organic and some of the early work trying to enforce the Organic Foods Production Act. So we're operating here on a couple of levels. One is we're talking about the practice of organic. I mean, we have really, obviously, and tremendous resources here in terms of practitioners and what the real challenges are, and what the reality of farming is on the ground and what it takes, and both from a success perspective as well as a challenge perspective. So we'd really like to explore some of those successes and challenges. We've heard a lot about citrus greening and the kinds of approaches that have been taken by Uncle Matt's in that respect. And we heard Jordan talk about the way he's approached agriculture on his own farm, as well as Marty, of course, who helped frame the overall issue. We also, and that's the practical side of all this, and there are a lot of successes and challenges, I won't say failures, but challenges on that side, the practical side. We're also, most of us here, also dealing on the policy level. And the policy level is where things sometimes get difficult, because when we talk about organic, we're talking about a community of people that spans growers, where it all starts, in production, through processors and handlers, and ultimately consumers. And when you approach this from the Beyond Pesticides perspective, which has a really eclectic board of directors with producers and consumers sitting together at the same board table, we're trying to figure out, what is both realistic, and then what is a system that we can ensure that has integrity? What is a system that we can trust overall? But also what is practical? We can't ever leave that out of the mix, because we can be advocating positions that we think are right that may not be able to be implemented. So that's where we have to have that discussion around the table that is practical, but also ensures that the public is willing to stand behind it and purchase it ultimately. Organic is constantly under attack, as you know, constantly being attacked by those who say it doesn't work, it's not profitable, it can't manage certain pests, etc. And now we have the problem from the consumer perspective that some of what USDA has done in implementing the statute in recent years has been very challenging for consumer groups, and we'll probably get into a little bit of that and maybe have a little discussion of why. And it's not just consumers, actually. It's sort of some certifiers, some growers, some processors, and consumers have raised questions about USDA's implementation, not of all aspects of the Act, but particularly of the public comment and hearing and comment process around changes in rules that govern organic. So we have a lot to talk about. I think we should start on the practical side. That makes sense, at least unless anybody objects. And just sort of run down the list of panelists here and ask you if you have anything you want to add as it relates to successes and challenges of organic production. Marty, is that something you want to kick off? You're listed here first.
Well, the success, in a nutshell, is that the industry's grown really because people have desired to buy the products that have been produced by organic growers, in excess, some years in excess of 20% a year, certainly in double-digit growth year in and year out. That I should have brought some data, but the figures that we show that I think it's over 80% of families are buying organic when I go to the grocery store, buying something organic when I go to the grocery store. I see people that I never would have thought, decades ago that, that person is probably going to buy organic. It's like, wow, why does that person have that in their basket? But it's either, organic milk because they have a kid, organic baby food, it's fruits and vegetables. They have a father with cancer, they have a son or kids that have sensitivities or have problems, or they're just committed to the practices. So I see the rapid growth as a success, and I see some challenges up ahead. I think that as I said the other day, we tend to want to make the perfect almost the enemy of the really doggone good, and what we all consider the alternative. And that I used to be scared, or used to always wait for Dennis Avery or Alex Avery to come out with their next thing. It was the Hudson Institute that was going to attack organic. Now it's some of my colleagues almost within that are scaring off consumers by the fear. And so I think that we have to rekindle that community and that coalition if we possibly can, to help organic grow. I didn't start this thing out decades ago when I started farming organically to think that 1.5% of the land in organic 40 years later, or whatever it is, that 8% of the market was a success. I've considered it a failure at this point in my life. Watching the environmental problems only perpetuate, and the other side, the agrochemical frame, the status quo, having not retreated at all. They may attack us, but we haven't we haven't really made that much progress, in my humble opinion. We made some, but. So the questions were, almost in-house labeling, taking product and putting your own label on it. What do we think about that, as well as the supply side shortage? And so I would tee it off at least, and then look to other panelists if you have a viewpoint as well. But the industry, I just came from a week in Washington where that was the biggest thing that the industry was saying is we don't see enough materials to meet the marketplace right now. We don't see enough raw ingredients to meet the marketplace. I go into Publix and I see signs that say, they're out. Sorry, we're out of organic eggs. We hope next week we'll have more. Sorry, we're out of milk. We're out of milk. Manufacturers, friends of mine that have built brands and are in manufacturing, they go, we don't want to go offshore. We're not the people that look to do this and go offshore for the cheapest price. We want to source from U.S. farmers. It's not available.
Why?
I think and then let me answer the second one, and then I'll go back to the why question. You guys are sourcing oranges from wherever you can get them at this point. Some because of greening. When I started farming organically on a larger scale, we put a sticker on every single watermelon because, God forbid, in our estimation, if somebody got a bad watermelon, we wanted them to be able to contact us so we could make it up to them. All we got was cards and letters. It was the best watermelon. How many letters have you written about a watermelon? I'm coming to Florida with my kids. I'd like to up to Disney World. I'd like to stop on the way back and get 6 more watermelons on the way back to Detroit. It was amazing. But we did that also in retrospect. We didn't do it for that reason, but in retrospect, it made people all over the country saying, "Hey, when are you guys going to get those the watermelons with those little white stickers on it?" And that's what they would ask the stores. The stores would say, "Oh, they're asking for y'all's watermelons. When are you going to get it?" And so I think it's terrible when farmers sell into a house brand, so to speak, as you asked, because there's no loyalty to the farmer.
Do they have a choice?
Yeah, they could brand it. Uncle Matt's could say it's Uncle Matt's. It's not, Kroger or Publix or 365.
So you're not
brand.
doing Whole Foods orange juice?
It is
House brand.
No, you're talking about private label.
Yeah,
Yep.
private
Yeah,
label.
right. No, everything that we sell is our label. We don't entertain anybody on private label.
And you haven't felt any pressure to
No. No, it's the other way around. When we first started out, it was like I walk into this room and I got a certified organic red grapefruit. Would you like to buy one? Would you like to buy one? Taste this, you know. Okay. 15 years later, it's just the opposite. All right. The people are coming to us, and no different than Publix or Whole Foods. In the beginning, it was always, well, what's your volume? Okay, and what's your price? And it didn't matter if you made something up, they wasn't interested. I mean, and this is just business, and I'm not picking on. Yeah, I mean, this is the way it, unfortunately, it works, whether you're conventional and or organic. But there's so much now about, with us, is volume and price point, okay? And I'll give you a good example. We have organic peaches, okay, and it's the Florida peach. And historically, the Florida peach, compared to the Georgia peach, is smaller, okay, and doesn't have the shelf life that the Georgia peach does. So, unfortunately, the buyers, they use that. Oh, okay, you got a 3-inch peach? Well, no, not a 3-inch. Well, you know, we pay you $4 a pound if you had a 3-inch peach. Well, all we got's a 2.5. Oh, God, 2.5. Well, we can only give you $1 a pound. You know, so, and this is just business now. So I'm not complaining. I'm just giving you an example. So you say, okay, Mr. Buyer, what do you want? You tell me what you want. Oh, well, we want a 3-inch peach with a 7-day shelf life, and we want it delivered this volume on these days. Okay, let's sign a contract, and what price will you quote me right now today if I can do that? Well, you know, I got another meeting. I mean, so, you know, this is the game you get into, and this is all part of the business. I'm not complaining, I'm just explaining, you know. So a perfect example is how we've dealt with the Florida peach now. And so we say, okay, you only want a 3-inch peach. Well, let me give you an example, Mr. Buyer. Come out here to our thing, and we're going to do a you pick it tomorrow. There'll be 45 women at this peach orchard at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I want you to sit over here by my truck and you tell me how many women you see with a pair of calipers measuring that peach. None. I said, you guys set this standard of a 3-inch peach knowing that we can't meet that, so you keep us down. All right, we're a sharecropper. All right. So I said, put the Florida peach out there. Let the housewife make the decision. You buyers don't need to make the decision. Let her tell you whether she wants it or not. It's taken a few years, but now it's working. So they've agreed, and we don't have any problem selling our peaches, especially in the state of Florida. Now, true, they don't have the shelf life like the Georgia peach, but if you ever see, and I'm just saying Georgia because that's who we compete with. The only reason the Florida peach is successful is we're 30 days ahead of them on the market. If we went head to head with them, we would lose because they do have better shelf life and they have a bigger peach. Same with the blueberries. We beat Georgia to the market by 30 days. So
30 days ahead because of the distance or because your peach is right there?
Climate.
Geography.
Because of what?
Geography.
Climate, yeah. Your peach is right there.
So fortunately, you know, we're in a good position because we're first on the market. But, and Marty's well aware of this, and so is everybody else that's involved in here. It's all about volume and quality when you start dealing with the big boys, and that's the way they run their business. So we don't have the acreage to where we can, you know, they want 5,000 pounds a week delivered. We can't do that. We don't have the acreage, and so you have to drop down into the smaller segments. But surprisingly, every one of these guys that we've dealt with for the last 10 or 12 years are saying, look, organics is on fire in our store, and we'll take whatever you got.
So the question is whether or not they'll whether they'll get the farms that they already know.
Build their own supply
Yeah,
side.
build their own supply side. Certainly that's not the case in terms of the major grocery stores.
Right.
Although the Wedge Co-op, and if anybody's in Minneapolis, they have their own farm now. To not really deal with supply side. The farmer was retiring, but that's interesting that it starts to be vertically integrated from farm to their own the co-op. In that case, I want to go back to a couple of things that you said, and that is that the supply side is so in dire straits that a lot of our work last week in D.C. was really encouraging the agencies to look at how, and the Hill, on how we can encourage transition to organic, and not so much even, beginning farmers. I mean, you can't get credit. You go to get a loan and they want 5 years worth of financial statements or 3 years worth of financial statements, and you go, well, I'm a beginning farmer. Well, so we can't loan you money if you don't have a track record, that type of thing. On how we can also get conventional farmers to look at converting some of their land to organic. You asked, will they get their own farms? And what we see is them getting larger conventional farms that they know and say, will you guys put in, 500 acres of organic onions, potatoes? We're already dealing with you on thousands of acres of conventional stuff. Can't you just do the organic cabbage for us, the organic potatoes, the organic this, the organic that? Because we already have a relationship. And that, to me, is somewhat it's an opportunity for those farmers to improve their practices, but it's also not the community that I'm most worried about and that I don't work for the hardest. They're just kind of it's convenient for them, I think, to go to the conventional fruit and vegetable growers and say, will you put in some organic stuff for us?
Yeah, I mean, talk about citrus in the state of Florida. There's 500,000 acres of conventional citrus, and there's less than 5,000 acres of organic. So, we're like an ant on a biscuit. And unfortunately, you get into that little situation where the buyers know that. I mean, they know you can't provide, X number of volume and stuff like that. But I'm not complaining. Please understand that. I'm just saying that we know this is how it works. It worked that way in the conventional market too, until you got organic. But I give little talks around. Matt says, I grow it. Ben researches it and he sells it. Okay, so that's kind of the way it is in the family. But we work with, I give little talks in farm tours, take them out and show them the peaches, like some of y'all went on the tour yesterday. But it's interesting, the people that are not aware of the organic arena. I mean, they read the label, they understand that. But the people that I see that's got the most influence in this market right now are the women that's sitting in this room, okay? You are the buyer, all right? And you are in the majority of you. Buy all the groceries, okay? You got the kids and the grandkids, and you're fixing the meals, and you are well aware of what they're eating or drinking or not eating or not drinking. So I like to go to some of the Publixes around Clermont. We only got 4. You just barely had 1 here 20 years ago, and now we got 4. But I like to just sit back and look at our organic orange juice. All right, now there's a big shelf there of all kind of juices there available. The housewife obviously doing most of the shopping. The lady or the shopper, the buyer that is buying the Uncle Matt's organic orange juice, she pushes the thing up off the shelf, off she goes.
Went right for it.
Huh?
She went right for that.
Oh yeah. She's not window shopping. Okay, now you see the gal comes up, she pulls up this one, checks the price, reads the label, sets it down, like that. And you watch the organic shopper just go down the list of whatever they're buying. If it's organic, they're buying it because it's organic. They're not buying it because it's a better buy
Right.
a bigger volume, whatever. And I love to I give these little talks, and there's a website, I'm sure Marty knows about it. It's called whatsonmyfood.org. Okay, it's a USDA website, public information, but unless you're in that little public arena that gives these websites, you never even hear about it. So I tell all the women that I see, go on that, and it'll show you everything that you can even imagine that you can eat or drink is on that website, and it'll show you the pesticide residues that's on it, and then you take that pesticide and you Google that and see what the side effects are on the studies. And I love to put that information out because it's public information. It's not something I invented.
We pay for the compilation, so.
That's right.
And the publication.
Yeah. So.
Taxpayer money.
Jordan, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
As a new farmer, especially.
Yeah, so my comment was sort of related to that. As a new farmer, part of the issue, I guess, with lack of supply, there's not a whole lot of, from my viewpoint, there's not a whole lot of incentive. I know, for us, there's not an incentive without a huge risk to increase production. There are people who come along. It seems like I get maybe twice a year somebody comes along with a new scheme, that some plan that I should sell them vegetables and it's going to make us both a lot of money, and it's yet hasn't panned out to anything. It kind of tying back into a lot of the ideas that are going around about how America needs more farmers and farmers are aging. There really is a lack of incentives, and for those of us getting into it born without land or money, it can be sort of difficult, and it's impossible to get to the scale where you're dealing with, we can have our products I've had my products in Publix before, but we can't deal directly with them. They have to go through a distributor. Mm-hmm. So, coming up, 40 years from now, I don't know where we'll be, 20 years from now, where we'll be.
Do you
but
use a distributor now?
For some of the things, yeah. We do a lot of local sales, but for the items that we have more of, we do.
So you have a CSA. Do you also do direct marketing? Or
Yeah,
farmers markets?
we do almost everything. If it's a way to sell organic vegetables, I've tried it, which includes direct sales to smaller stores. We have a CSA. We go to one farmers market.
Which one?
441 Market in Alachua County. And what else?
And do you find that consumers care or distinguish between local and organic at the level that you're interacting?
Yeah, so we live in Gainesville, we market a lot of things in Gainesville, which is where the University of Florida is, and a lot of the folks in our CSA are faculty and staff at UF, and which tend to be more informed than just the average consumer. There's not, with us where we are, there's not a whole lot of misconception between the local and the organic. People sort of want both, but they understand that most of it is not organic.
That's good.
Two comments. One, I hate to say this one first. I'll say it. To me, it's the undue influence of the failure of land-grant universities. There's a lot of, the people that had the passion I started doing it before I knew what I was doing. Anyway, I still wouldn't know what I was doing if I went back and did it. I'd be flying on the seat of my pants. He at least got to go to school and take some courses, whether or not they were helpful or whether or not maybe one or two of the classes was helpful. That may be debatable.
I had 8 useful credit hours out of 120.
So that's the failure of land grants, and I mentioned that the other day, is that we would have done a lot better focusing on an organic extension, and you see organic conferences now providing much more useful information, in my humble opinion. Farming conferences, field days on organic farmers, learning from other organic farmers. That type of information transfer, I think, still surpasses probably what kids are getting, or young people are getting, or old people, whoever goes in the land grant.
Yeah, and so I would say about that, maybe 2 years ago, we're about an hour away from his office. So sometimes folks come out there. There was a woman who came from the USDA they were doing the audit for QCS or something. They came out to our farm to talk to me about something, and to see if, to check if the certifier was doing their business right. And at the end of the thing, they said, "Well, is there anything you'd like to tell us?" I said, "Yes, there is. All y'all, 4 of y'all, have your salaries. You have a job because I'm doing this, and I would just like for y'all to remember that I'm here. Me and these 4 ladies over here are picking collard greens, so that y'all can be in the office and type reports about the things that I do and other people do." And that's just kind of a picture of where we are with some of these food issues. There's a huge, I would say, I don't know, huge. There's some looming issues, that things that could become progressively worse, for our food supply and for just the integrity of things in our nation. But there's so many resources that are poured into things like, here where we are, the University of Florida IFAS Extension, which for me, they haven't done anything. I can go up to the man, he gets a salary sitting in my office, in the county office, and I say, "Hey, what about this?" He said, "Well, I don't rightly know." That's what the man told me. And I just thought, you get about $48,000 a year to tell me that you don't rightly know how to do something. So there is all of y'all are here because of some problem or some issue that you feel passionate about, I'm sure. I think we could take a look at where some of the resources are headed and where they're going.
I'm just trying to see how, you could get the message out or be more organized about that. Because sometimes, it may sound like anathema, but a trade group for organics is not such a bad idea if it could spread the right message and educate the public.
There's an organic trade association, and
And the consumers.
and there's also consumer associations, which I hope are supporting and promoting the alternative or organic production. I will say and this is a current event now, and in fact I may disagree with one of my colleagues on the
We'll get to that.
on the panel. I've been working for years trying to put together an organic research and promotion program that would self-generate a little bit of money within the industry to fund research, which is sorely needed. Look at, we heard from him how, what tools are there to help me? Every organic farmer needs research, most of them.
Okay. So maybe we'll come back to the supply issue, because I don't think we fully addressed that. Obviously, if we want to become the conventional form of agriculture, we're going to have to work with people that don't necessarily buy into the values and principles that serve as the foundation of organic. They're going to have to abide by them, right? But they may not. It may be the price.
Yeah,
it may be the
there's
market. that's driving
there's
them.
plenty of that.
And
Yeah.
I don't care why anybody switches to organic. If it's just money, if they'll farm organically and change their environmental practices, I'm all for it.
Okay. Bonnie.
So how do we capitalize on that point of where we're ready to get more people like you with passion, with the knowledge, with the integrity, and we'll do it? How do we get more of you ready to go? How do we get people like me to teach people like you so I can transfer
The
knowledge?
the policies that we were advocating for in terms of how we get more of Jordan, from the one generation to the next, is we were advocating for more programs to support transition, whatever that means. Ways that crop insurance we've tried to reform so that it's finally applicable or an opportunity, and it still needs more reform for organic operations, which was worked against organic operations up until recently, and is still not perfect as far as home farm revenue programs, but it's getting better.
You guys feel like we're about ready to go?
Yeah, and I hope we do. We need to educate the public about why natural isn't organic, that type of stuff, and really look at. I asked the USDA administrator why, if you want to make a commitment to organic, why isn't the beginning farmer and rancher program having its priorities a priority? We want to grow organic farmers. Fund some beginning farmer programs that will help grow the next generation of organic farmers. Make it a priority. So little things like that. And then the agency went, there's a concept. You have it in a strategic plan. So I'm hoping we do start to do the curve. It's the undue influence of corporate agrochemical money and biotech money is what's keeping it down.
Right.
Yeah, I would say that, farmers generally are market-driven producers. The market wants something, and farmers have an opportunity to produce it. They see it, and they meet that need. And some of them really don't care how it's met. Like Marty was saying, if somebody transitions to organic for money, well, that's a good thing. I mean, I met a guy, I've been buying these boxes from a guy. He grows Chinese vegetables. He's not Chinese at all. He has, Chinese people pay him money. But he don't care. He's just, there's a market opportunity for it, and he's going to do everything. He's going to, if they got diamondback moths, he's going to spray Lanate twice a week, and that's what you have to do. So it's the same thing. If people were more informed and people demand a certain product, people, regardless of what they believe, philosophies or their, goodwill and intention, they're gonna do what the market wants ultimately.
So that's a great segue, and we can come back to these issues, but that's a great segue to the policy issues and that's why we have two lawyers on the panel. But they're really progressive lawyers, so they're open-minded people. But it's really interesting because those of us that have been involved in this issue before there was policy around organic really worked through a series of voluntary agreements. We had these voluntary groups that got together, consumers, farmers, and they created voluntary standards that everybody adhered to. And then the states got involved and created their standards. And then at some point we had 25 states had organic standards, and it seemed like the right time to come up with a federal uniform standard for across the country. And that's how we got, that's an oversimplification, but that's how we got the Organic Foods Production Act. But when that law was written and passed in 1990, and it only took like 2 years to pass, and it was purely bipartisan, it was very fast. And it involved consumers and farmers sitting around, and environmentalists sitting around the table and working with legislative offices to write the law. But when it was developed, it was really a combination of the experiences that came out of the states and these voluntary associations like California Certified Organic Farmers and the Maine Organic Farmers and Growers Association, and there was a group called AFPANA, Organic Food Producers of North America. So all these different people were in the room, and they came up with this, what ended up being one uniform national standard with certain principles. I read one of them to you this morning in terms of being recognizing that there are interdependent systems that involve soil and organisms and people, and the concept that we are about the organic core value is about maintaining and improving the quality of the soil, not degrading the soil, but recognizing the value of being a soil-based system and working up from that. So we end up with this law, and what distinguished that discussion and the resulting law in that room, with these Congress people, was that most of the people in that room were rejecting the way government had managed inputs in agriculture historically. How did EPA evaluate a chemical? How was the public involved? To what degree were the stakeholders, to what degree did the stakeholders actually have some real authority? So this group sat around and saying, we don't want to go down the road of history on these other industries, the conventional industry. We're going to create an independent National Organic Standards Board with 15 people, 3 environmentalists, 3 consumers, 3 farmers, a handler, certifier, and a scientist. And these people are going to sit around, and they're going to be given by Congress the authority to determine what is basically determine, I mean, the secretary can reject it but can add to it, determine what materials are allowed in organic production. That's a hell of a lot of authority to give to an independent board.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented authority.
Wow.
The other thing that it did was it basically said this board, through the USDA, will convene meetings with the public to discuss everything it does, everything. That it do this in a very public fashion, that it seek and when we say public, we're talking growers, manufacturers of inputs, we're talking certifiers, come to the table. Consumers, everybody. And so that process was very different from the way EPA operated. EPA went into a black box. They go into a room, they take some comments, it's not really a public hearing process, you don't get any real feedback, you don't have an independent board saying, well, wait a minute, that may sound good on paper, but this isn't the way it works. So it was very removed from the public, even though EPA is very careful and good about subjecting what they ultimately decide to a public hearing comment process. So some of these meetings, as you can imagine, are very contentious. I mean, we had a big blow up 2 years ago now, I think it was, on antibiotics in apple and pear production. And the question was, yeah, we need to get rid of this because we know, did you all know you're buying organic apples and pears with antibiotics sprayed on them? Nobody that I ever talked to knew that.
Not on the apples, on the trees.
On the dormant trees.
They were never sprayed
apple
on the
pear production, yeah.
They were never sprayed on the apples.
Right, they weren't sprayed on the apple. They're sprayed for fire blight on the tree on the blossom as it was. Right.
Jay, don't forget alcohol.
Right. So I'm finished. But I just want to lay the framework. I just want to lay the framework for how this system distinguished itself from the way the conventional system. Okay. So then, once the system's established, the lawyers get involved because the question is, are we adhering to that process? There you go. Sylvia, that's your setup.
Yes, thank you.
So what's going on? And I'm raising this in the deep desire, deepest wish that goes to the core of my being, that the consumer, producer, environmental community can come together on all these issues. Okay? Marty, you can take that back to the bosses.
Jot that down.
What's going on, thank you, Jay, for the great setup. And I think what's going on is where consumer groups and lawyers in the room are seeing is a potential for that beautiful setup of ensuring public input and ensuring the involvement of the entire organic community to remain as sort of the core methodology, if you will, or principle of the National Organic Program. Jay's referring to a lawsuit that was filed earlier this week on behalf of a large coalition of, organic farmers as well as environmental and consumer groups, beyond Pesticides and Center for Food Safety involved. That's challenging essentially what we're, in our view, a unilateral change by the USDA in terms of how materials are removed from, the exempted materials, synthetic materials that are exempted, as a one-time, temporary exemptions are removed from the organic program. So under the original setup, the NOSP, the board, has the sole authority to propose and add potential exempted synthetic materials to the list. The secretary can reject it, but the USDA doesn't have the authority to add or keep exempted materials on the list. And under the National Organic Foods Production Act, materials stayed on for 5-year periods. After 5 years, it's either recommended to be renewed or it's automatically removed from the list. In September of 2011, NOSP, the USDA unilaterally changed that rule, 2013, by issuing via the Federal Register notice stating that instead of having a 5-year automatic exemption, every 5 years, materials on the exemption list would stay on unless specifically removed. it feels like a small change. There's still a process of 5-year review, but now the process changed from one of automatic, exemption to retention, and it kind of switches to what Jay's referring to as the EPA process of doing things, where once something is approved, it takes a lot of effort to get it removed.
Is the burden shift
Yeah.
then?
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because instead of proving why you ought to be on the list, now you have to prove why.
You have
You
to
should take it
petition.
off.
From the list.
You
So
petition.
basically-
It shifts the whole,
Yeah, so,
economic
but,
responsibility.
Sylvia's referred to this as temporary exemptions, but the reality is there's some materials used in organic that will always be used in organic. It's technically called a temporary exemption, but there are very few materials that you would classify as controversial.
Right.
Antibiotics is one. We're dealing with one right now called methionine. It's a synthetic amino acid used in poultry production. There's a handful of materials. So those are the ones that the NOSB says, well, what can we do to incentivize research? The best way to incentivize research is to have what is called in the law, I believe, a sunset provision, which is what we have. So what happens is USDA sees that this material looks like the board's getting a little antsy, may take this off the list, and then all of a sudden research dollars flows to Professor Johnson at Oregon State, who now has developed an alternative yeast-based material for antibiotics. That actually, when the USDA didn't think the board was serious about that, they did not fund his research. They actually stopped research funding. So it does incentivize the kind of research, I believe, we want to see in our research institutions. When a material is brought to the NOSB under a petition, 2/3 of the board must vote. That means you basically need to get all these different stakeholder groups together. They really have to wrestle with each other and say, and they often, the growers come to the environmentalists and consumers and say, look, we won't be able to grow this without this. And the environmentalists inevitably say, for the most part, no, yeah, historically this is true.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason they do that is because they know it's on for 5 years, and then the growers will come back in the next 5 years and say, well, that alternative we were talking about, we're dealing with this right now in cotton. Terry, what's it?
Hydrogen chloride.
Hydrogen chloride. All the environmentalists and consumers supported the relisting of hydrogen chloride, a terrible chemical, right? Really hazardous for delinting cotton. Why did we do that? Because we thought we're in a 5-year sunset. We think when we bring comments that raise with the organic growers in Texas, forget how many acres, 3,000, it's not a lot of cotton in Texas, 3,000 acres or something. That will incentivize the research. They even came to the board and said, we agree with the environmentalists. We don't want to use this stuff. And that creates the climate for change. It's sort of an incentivizing process. There are very few examples of environmentalists or consumers taking away tools that growers have needed to produce profitably and effectively. So the lawsuit, though, despite all the substantive stuff we're talking about, has nothing to do with substance. That's what.
Yeah, the lawsuit focuses really on the procedural aspects of things. It's asking USDA to retract the rule and to open it up for public, comment. And I think that there's something to be said about the makeup of the board, the give and take, and I think as the organic community, responds to the market demand to become more conventional, the tension between activists and organic retailers and organic growers, there's going to be greater tension, and there's thus more of a reason for having the strong board input, having that across the board representation in defining what the program should look like and what the program should stand for. And hopefully the lawsuit, if successful, will bring about the platform for that conversation to happen. And in the end, for the community to decide.
We stop talking to each other. And this is a vehicle. Right now, it feels like USDA is not talking with the public in issuing these what we're calling rule changes. And in fact, in a meeting prior to the last National Organic Standards Board meeting, everybody in the room agreed. The Organic Trade Association, the certifiers, everybody in the room agreed. But when we went around trying to get plaintiffs on the lawsuit, It was not easy.
Well, what happens
It's
in
not
that
easy.
situation and what causes that? What happens is you have PACs now and you get bilateral, bipartisan contributions from biotech and big ag companies that go to certain senators and certain congressmen, and then they pick up the phone and they make a call to the people at the USDA, the secretary of whoever's appointed in which
Right.
agency, and say, look, this is the deal.
This is-
We're gonna go this way. And then you all start to infight in your own board against each other.
That's
and
right.
then hating the USDA, and you ask why there's no conversation, because they cut it off at that level.
Yeah. So, but we have Marty here, who's an incredibly influential person, really, I mean, in the whole organic policy arena. And there really is an opportunity for us to at least agree on process. As many an environmentalist and consumer has said before the NOSB, I'm willing to lose in a fair process.
Mhm.
I'm not willing to lose in an unfair fight.
Right.
So we have to define and adhere to the fair process. And if we could just have that conversation in an open sort of way, I think we can get past this, regardless of what the outcome ultimately is on Sunset.
And the lawsuit will not determine the outcome. The lawsuit will hopefully open up the opportunity for the process to happen. Yeah.
So it's a little blip. The way we're advancing this is we want to protect consumer trust in the organic label. And knowing our constituency and knowing the people we interact with on a daily basis, we feel this lack of process will hurt their trust in the organic label. So that's, most of the things we do, we're putting it through a screen of how do we think our constituents will react to this? How will our constituents react to antibiotics in apple and pear production? And, I don't want to get into whether it's on the apple or not, but there are all kinds of scientific issues around using antibiotics in agriculture that we can't get into here because it would take the next 4 hours. But,
4 days.
4 days. But,
You can just
but
say
the
that
point
rain
is the
comes.
process.
The rain
And-
comes and the local spraying goes down to the roots, it's sucked up systemically, that's pretty much all you have to say. It gets in the apple no matter whether you spray it on the apple or not, right?
Right, it gets transferred laterally.
It gets used in the environment,
Gets
which
used
is
in the
more
environment.
of a problematic.
Yeah, and so
If it
you're
contributes to
breeding
resistance,
Right.
it's a problem.
Yeah. So I'm hoping this is like a little blip in the history of organic with sort of a growing pain as the market grows and as the industry grows, there's a lot of pressure on EPA USDA to find ways to expedite the process. But it can't be done at the expense of public participation. That's the key here.
I just wanted to say that there are these sort of legitimate disputes. Marty might disagree on some, material that should be allowed in organic and all that, but I think we also have to put this in the context of the danger of organic being this little tiny part of USDA, and that we do have to defend ourselves in a lot of ways. I mean, I'll just tell you a little story. When I first got involved in this, I was going to submit some comments to the National Organic Program, and because I was in DC, I went to USDA and I decided to, bring them by hand. And if you look at the Department of Agriculture, I mean, it's this huge, incredibly huge building that takes up several city blocks. And I know the National Organic Program has grown a little bit since then, but I went in, and because, after 9/11, you can't go into a federal building, you can't go up to an office without having an escort. So they called up the National Organic Program, and there literally wasn't anybody there who could come down to escort me up because there were so few people in that office, and they had to stay there to be able to answer the phones and stuff. And I had to wait like 45 minutes for somebody to be able to come. And it just gave me this little sense of how tiny the organic program is within USDA, and it's really pretty vulnerable to the forces of conventional agriculture and also of big organic, or who are people not like Marty, but people like General Mills who've gone into organic and want to do things the way they've always done them, but call it organic and get that premium price. Mm-hmm. So, not all of these disputes are disputes among ourselves. I mean, I think we really do have to defend ourselves against that larger picture. And I've done some work on organic on my own, but I work for this group called Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. And what we do is we serve public employees who are having problems with their agencies properly implementing environmental laws. And, one of the things Jay asked me to talk about is within USDA, we've now had 3 different scientists at least come to us and tell us a lot of stories about other scientists within USDA who are being quashed for doing research on things like neonics and GMOs, that are coming out in ways that Monsanto and other big ag doesn't like. And these people are having their careers threatened. They're being told they can't publish this or that. And we recently did this petition for rulemaking for USDA to strengthen its scientific integrity policy. And, I just wanted to, we tried to keep these people anonymous to protect them from their jobs, so we didn't say in here exactly what research they're doing and certainly not their names, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that have happened that we actually were told about by employees there. So I'm just going to read this little list. So they had its directives not to publish data on certain topics of particular sensitivity to industry, orders to rewrite scientific articles already accepted for publication in peer-reviewed journals to remove sections which could provoke industry objections. And here's the one that really got the most publicity and concern: a summons to meet with Secretary Vilsack in an effort to induce retraction of a paper that drew the ire of industry representatives. He didn't like having that publicized. Orders to retract a paper after it had been accepted for publication in a peer-reviewed journal. It could only be published if the USDA scientist took his name off it. One of the researchers was demoted from a supervisory status and a reprimand.
I know who that is.
Right. That had to do with bees after providing testimony before Congress. Disruptive and lengthy internal investigations to search out irregularities that could be used against scientists who were coming up with results that Monsanto didn't like. Suspensions without pay and disciplinary actions.
Better be careful, dude.
Delays in approving submission for publication of scientific papers that are controversial. Restrictions on topics that USDA scientists may address in conference presentations, and threats by USDA managers to damage the careers of scientists whose work triggers industry complaints. And so all these things are things that have really happened to particular scientists at USDA. So this is kind of what we're up against, and we all had hoped that this kind of thing would improve in the Obama administration, and maybe in some areas it has, but certainly in some areas it hasn't. So this is the context that the National Organic Program, the agency that they're in. So I just wanted to put that perspective on it.
One of the things I wanted to chime in, and I mentioned it earlier, but is the intimidation of researchers at land-grant universities, not just ARS scientists. I was stunned to hear that report, that list, and it's shocking to me, but the intimidation on at publicly funded university research facilities trying to do agronomic research that are totally intimidated about their career and threatened about what they can or can't do research and what the results or publications might be. You had asked, or somebody had asked, the one thing, right now the price of organic corn is tremendously high. There's a huge shortage. It's being imported from, other, like Argentina or Romania. People are going wherever they can go to get livestock feed because there's a huge shortage. Organic soybeans, the price differential is huge. So the question is, why wouldn't conventional guys go, if I could get 4 times the amount, why wouldn't I transition? And so that's why I want to leave this discussion at least with saying we need to have policy incentives. It's not just this. It's way too lazy. As you get bigger and bigger, as the farms get bigger and bigger, and you're farming thousands and thousands, multi-thousands of acres, not to be able to spray as much herbicide as you want, to plant GMO seeds, plant herbicide, not deal with weeds. You have to be more active to be an organic farmer. You have to be in touch with your fields. You have to go walk your fields. You have to be in touch with the soil. You have to look around and manage your farm operation. It's a lot easier just to stay on the status quo treadmill, and we need policy incentives and policy change to encourage a broader transition to organic in this country. I mean, if you want to try to have agriculture be a positive impact on the environment, on climate change, rather than contributing to more and more climate change because of petroleum-based fertilizers, petroleum-based pesticides, the amount of energy that agriculture takes in this scenario, et cetera, et cetera. And then the one thing you had said that I started to mention was, we're trying to do an organic research and promotion program. We've listened for years to farmers, trying to figure out how we redesign a vehicle to get from point A to point B, rather than just say all cars are bad because I read a story about a Pinto, and I remember Pintos are bad, and so all cars are bad. You're going, can't we redesign a car to get from point A to point B safely, responsibly? And I hope that this organic research and promotion program, if the dieback could say, why don't we read the thing before we come out totally against it? And let the conversation happen, and then let the organic farmers and handlers vote on it to see. But it would aggregate what we estimate $40 million a year to help fund research, promotion, information of new farmers and transitioning what we would hope to be transitioning farmers to organic. So there is a way that we're trying to look at how the industry itself generates a little bit of money across the sector to say we need to grow this thing.
So I want to comment on that too. I mean, sometimes I speak with conventional farmers where we live out, our farm is very small, and there's a lot of grain, dairy, hay, cows, peanuts, corn, watermelons around where we live, and there's some, there's a lot of conventional farmers. And sometimes when I talk to them and they say talk about organic a little bit, there's a fear, I think, in not being able to be able to use all these things that you're accustomed to. I think that there's a certain level of fear that, about doing something new and doing something different and having to get out from the regular mold that you're in. But I think what Marty's talking about is the policies definitely help enforce the sort of the status quo and the continued use of the huge amounts of chemical fertilizer and pesticides. And to give an example of that, there's a man he's probably a few years older than me. He inherited his family's farm. He farms somewhere 12,000 acres of peanuts and corn and some other things, green beans sometimes. But they have on their peanut fields, there's a USDA program that pays them to do no-till on their peanut fields. And what that is supposed to be is that they have residue of something, a cover crop, and they herbicide it, and they come in and plant peanuts. And the cover crop, the dead cover crop, helps hold down the weeds and retain moisture and stop erosion. That's sort of the idea behind it. But generally, the thing that's ridiculous is because the people are so set in their ways, and they have a program that helps them continue doing whatever they've always done. The man plows up the field. It starts off with bare ground, and he comes in and plants oats, and he plants them so thin because he's saving money on seed. He plants them just thin enough to come up and make a little green crop come up. And then as soon as it's yay big, whenever it's time to plant peanuts, instead of developing an actual mulch that would actually serve the purpose of the program of which he's been paid $16 an acre by taxpayer money to do, he'd go ahead and spray it when it's time to plant peanuts anyways, no matter if there's this much stubble, or whatever. Well, he's already saved the money on seed. He's got the money in the herbicide. He's got the money in the diesel. he's actually making a net profit on this. It becomes an enterprise for the man. He's got, he's getting paid $16 an acre, and he has $12 in it. So,
He farms the government.
right. So I mean, that's $4 an acre times 7,000 acres of peanuts, and then it just helps him get another truck at the end of the year.
So the question was about organic milk and its success and cooperatives. Crop Cooperative, which is the poster child really of they were a bunch of small farmers that tried to figure out how are we going to survive and why don't we market our milk together. They happened to be in the right place at the right time, at the right moment, with the right product. And I think that what helped spur the extraordinary growth in dairy, of the dairy sector, which is huge, is RGBH. At that point in time, that when I had my kids are 24 and 22. It was like, the only thing they were going to drink was organic milk anyway. But that mindset of many moms out there might have been, I'm going to get organic milk because it doesn't have growth hormones in it, RGBH, et cetera, all those things that for me are flashpoints. So milk is the one thing I'm going to get, or organic baby food. So the dairy sector was in the right place at the right time, I think, and has grown because of several different things. Little kids drink milk, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think your question about, is that structure one that more organic operations could take advantage of? We're trying to talk to growers right now about looking at the potential to form a cooperative. It's up to them whether they choose to do it or not, but that we see this as an opportunity to get growers to think about working together, whether it's only organic, whether it's organic and conventional, and they use it for equipment buying, input buying, frost cloth buying, or whether it's a marketing co-op, and the marketing co-op could be selling organic vegetables and conventional vegetables, or whatever it is. It's up to the farmers to do. It's hard to get farmers to really want to work together cooperatively. You have more experience in looking at citrus industry pooling product together as well. I don't know if you have thoughts on it.
Well, it's a very hard subject to sell in the citrus industry. Jay made a good comment there, or maybe it was Jordan, that the guys that are the production men in citrus, okay, like the age of my boys, they got into the arena when it was herbicides, pesticides, miticides, fungicides. All right, I got in it when we couldn't even spell those words, never heard of them, So I grew into that, but my two boys in that generation, they walked into it and it was already the standard. For them now to walk away from that standard, they have in their mind, if they see weeds growing in a grove, it's like, my God, the grove's been abandoned, it's going to die. You can't grow citrus that way. Where for hundreds of years we grew cover crops and they grew up as high as your head and you cultivated them in the wintertime. But now it's like a fairway. I mean, there's no weeds growing, there's no grass growing, everything is irrigated, fertigated, just go down the list. So it's very hard for us to go to a conventional grower and try to convert him to organics. Most of the guys that we have converted are burnt-out citrus growers like me that said, look, go ahead and take my grove, do what you want to with it, and hopefully we'll make money. So that's kind of, it hasn't been, I say none, that's not true, but there's a few, but it's very hard. That's a hard sell. And we've had growers that actually, there's a 3-year transition from conventional to organic. The second year, they just said, look, I'm sorry, you guys are great guys, we love you, but I can't stand the way my grove looks with all these weeds growing in here.
Going back to I really hear what you're saying, and I hear it a lot, on a not daily, but weekly basis. And, there's something being a part of a movement or being a part of a social chain, some sort of activity that's seeks social change that, drives a sense that we want to institutionalize change, that not everything can be individualized for everybody, and that if we view these changes, these systemic changes in the way we treat the soil and the land as necessary, and the amount of fuel we use, or fossil fuels in the production of, on the conventional side, if we really believe that affects all of us, even though it might not even be in our community. I mean, someone raised toxaphene. One of the problems with toxaphene, I forget one of the speakers, they documented transcontinental drift. I mean, it's transcontinental, it's hemispheric drift. So we can take this issue to the international level and say, we really have to be concerned about what's going on in India and China and Brazil and these other countries because of hemispheric drift, literally, in our rainwater, and we're in our food, etc. So it's really just a matter of whether we as individuals feel that as citizens or as activists we need to engage to affect institutional change rather than individual change. That's how I look at it. And I know for my own family, my kids are a little older than Marty's. When they were coming up and we were making these really difficult decisions to buy organic, because we didn't have public interest salary, sometimes no salary, it was tough. And, so you make that decision not only based on your own kids' health, though, but based on their future. I mean, these are, as I said in my opening remarks, these are generational decisions. And, if we're going to move this market to different practices, we will affect the next generation in terms of its survival. So that's how I view it.
And it's very important.
But we're not successful without your involvement. If you back away, if people like you back away from this discussion and feel alienated from it, we fail. Because we only survive our message. And I think we can win this. I really think this is a turning point. If we let the procedure go, we lose the whole thing. I feel that deeply bad. That's why we didn't sue on the substance, which we could have done. We could have easily gone right to a suit on substance. We felt it was more important and institutional changing to focus on the process. Because at the end of the day, if we had won the lawsuit just on this issue, it wouldn't have affected the process overall necessarily. So I remember people calling us up after Allar, and one woman calls us, she goes, "Oh God, I stopped feeding my kids apple juice and they've been drinking Kool-Aid for the last month because I'm so scared to give them apple juice." She was like, and, it's, what do I do? What do I do? And this was back in the early 90s, and we couldn't even refer people, we couldn't say, go down to your local store and buy organic. We basically, I remember Terry wrote an article, how to start a buyer's club. So we're telling these people, start a buyer's club? They go, oh my God, I have enough trouble getting my kids to school in the morning.